Hello everyone, back again with another board game tutorial. Today I'd like to do a tutorial of the game Exodus Proxima Centauri by NSKN Games. Um, this is it was one of my Grail games actually. I had wanted it for many years and I was able to find it a few years ago. Um, and the company was kind enough to actually allow me to put this on Tabletop Simulator. So I took the time to scan everything in and try to script the game a little bit. So that's what I'm going to be using to do the tutorial today. Saves a little bit on table space as always. Um, this is actually the first edition of the game. There have been two other editions since then. So just keep that in mind. The gameplay is pretty similar in all three editions. The second edition was a little bit more streamlined. I actually haven't seen a lot of the third edition, but there are videos out there. And I believe they changed the name to Chronicles or something like that. So, but check it out. This is a 4X game similar to Twilight Imperium. Plays a little bit faster, in my opinion. So, might be able to scratch that itch if you can't get to the table for an 8-hour game of Twilight Imperium. So, let's go down to Tabletop Simulator and we'll start looking at the game. So this is the Tabletop Simulator version that I imported in. Couple of things. This is the Kraken table, which is not one of my designs, but it is an asset that you can get for Tabletop Simulator. Needed a pretty big table for this. We're going to be using a house rule for the first edition that I like to use that's actually coming from the second edition, which I'll explain in a minute, but the explanation is right over here. Just to show off a little bit, I actually scripted some of this stuff myself. So just to show you here, you can actually go over to here and click for. We're gonna do a 4-player setup just so you can see what it looks like. If I click on this, it'll actually randomize all the tiles that are necessary, bring them out on the table, and then populate with the cubes on the table as well for each planet type. So so this is basically what the layout of the board looks like. There are spaces for the 4 players. Each different player count will have a different layout to start. These are hex tiles that represent the planets that you can travel to, and these spaces here are where the player hexes are going to go, which I'll bring out in a minute. Being a 4X game, you're going to be trying to basically spread out across the universe and have control over the planets, get the resources you need to upgrade your ships and stuff like that to be able to get more and more powerful. And that's basically how the game works. And the game plays over a certain amount of rounds, which you can see on the track right here. So you can play a shorter game or you can play a longer game, which is all detailed in the rule book. And I'll explain how all this works in a minute. But yeah, you can basically see that it's very similar to, if you've played Twilight Imperium, it's very similar to that game with the layout of the hexes here. And you even have a middle tile that people are going to be fighting over because it gives you extra points at the end of the game. So I'm going to set up the game for 4 players, and I'll get back to the tutorial in a second. So I've set up the game for 4 players here, just to show you what that entails. Let's say you were the green player. The first thing is you would place your planet in one of the spaces that I had indicated earlier. This is actually done randomly by player order. So the first player who had chosen at random would have a chance to place their planet wherever they want. I actually just placed the planets as close as possible to the corresponding colors. It'll just be easier during the tutorial to do it that way. But you normally would have the choices putting it wherever you want in one of those spaces. On Tabletop Simulator, I know not all of you will be playing on this format, but I would recommend locking down the tiles so that when you put resources on them and have to pick up the resources, that the tiles don't move. So if you go to toggle here, I just locked them down so that they were locked down. All the other tiles should be locked down as well. The other thing that you'll want to do as a player is you'll have some resources, which I've placed in these bags here. I took them all out, so you'll have some dice for yourself. You'll have these ships tokens that will actually go out on the map, and each ship token corresponds to its ship blueprint. These blueprints are going to be used during the game to show what kind of upgrades you're buying for your ships. And every time you buy an upgrade, every ship of that kind, which is only 2 of each, will get that upgrade. Just to mention something about these 3D models, I actually didn't model these assets in the game. I modeled all of the other ones, but these I got off of Thingiverse. I can't for the life of me find who the original creator was. I just looked, but I couldn't find him again. But I actually did modify them a little bit in Blender, my 3D software, to make them look a little bit more like the blueprint pictures. So they're not exactly the same as they were in Thingiverse. So you'll also have a deck of action cards. You should have a turn overview card. You'll have your player mat. And this is actually my player mat that I usually give my players. I just noticed that one's upside down, so I'll flip it over in a second. That basically is a rule summary that's a little bit more in detail than that one. I usually like to do that for my players, especially for a fairly complex game. So when I'm teaching a game, what I like to do, and I learned this, I believe, off of the Dice Tower, is you should really tell your players how you're going to make points in the game so they have an idea and refer to that fairly often. So right here in the rulebook, now this rulebook is a little strange. These headings actually separate the page at that spot, so you don't read it all the way up to the other side like you normally would a newspaper or something. For those of you who remember newspapers, you read it down here and then continue right next to it. So for victory, here's how you would get victory points. Population cubes on of planets and asteroids at the end of the game. So the player with the most population tokens on a planet gets all of the victory points. In case of a tie, all the players tied for the most population share the victory points. So 4 players have 2 population tokens each on a 1 victory point planet, and the 5th one only has 1 population token. The 4 will get 0.25 victory points each. And they do, in this edition of the game, use fractions of points. Something that they've changed in future iterations of the game. Space domination at the end of the game. So each player gets 1 victory point for each hex where they have at least 1 ship on the hex. The player who has ships on the High Council hex, which is the central hex that I showed earlier, will get an additional 3 victory points. So there's that exploration aspect, and this is like your area control aspect. Centurion resistance cards. So what is that? That's these cards here, and those cards are based on some tiles having these ships that you're going to have to fight before you can actually populate the area. So those are called the Centurion resistance. There's a whole story background to this game which you can read at the beginning of the rule book that I'm not going to get into, but so there's already some resistance on some of those things, and the cards are going to be drawn when you decide to fight, and the cards have different levels of victory points and rewards that you can have. So that's what this is referring to. Throughout the game, you're going to be fighting the other players for control of those planets. You're going to have space battles to do that, and the winner of every player versus player fight, and that's the player who has ships left at the end of a battle, is awarded victory points for every enemy ship destroyed, not just the ones you destroyed, but every ship that was destroyed during that battle, because you survived the battle. So you have to keep track of that. And the victory points are on the ship blueprints themselves. So if I go down to one of these blueprints here, just give me a second to do that. So right here, the victory point symbol is like this, I guess it's like a wreath or whatever. And anyway, that's the victory point symbol right there. Okay, so this one's worth 1 victory point. This one is worth, well, that one's kind of hard to see, 1 victory point. This one is worth 1 victory point. And this one is worth 1/4 of a victory point. So, oh, and at the end of the game, this is the last one here. Sorry, I was forgetting this one. The holder of the Chancellor tile gets 3 victory points, and the holder of the Vice Chancellor gets 1 victory point. So you will be starting the game with everybody having kind of like a player order, turn order card. I'm going to go show you what that looks like here. And there's a couple of them that are for the 1 and 2 player. So that's the Vice Chancellor, and this is the Chancellor. There was one more card there. So this game can play up to 6 people. So if you hold that card, you're going to get 3 victory points, but only at the end of the game if you're the person who holds it. And these cards are voted on during the game, and we'll talk about that during gameplay. So that's how you get points in the game. And you could always refer to the rule book to check that out. It's on one of the last pages of the rule book right here. Each person starts with 1 Dark Raider, 1 Carrier, 3 population cubes, along with 5 CPs, which is the currency in the game, on their planet. Now, it says in the rules to make sure to understand that the population cubes are considered to be on the planet itself, and the ships are supposed to be in space around the planet. Before we talk about the phases of a turn, let's take a look at the player mat for a second. You're going to have to be buying and upgrading with the resources that you get during the game. There are 3 different resources. There's Phasium, which is the green resource, Exinium, which is the red resource, and Crystallized Platinum or something like that, I think it's called, which is the blue resources. I'm just going to call them red, green, and blue. Now, you can see the cost for upgrading things on your player mat. So, in order to buy more cannons, for instance, the easiest type of cannon to buy, which is this one here, the 1 times, and then there's a 3 times, and there's a 2 times as well. The 1 times is 1, the 3 times is 3, the 2 times here is a 1 green, 1 blue, and then the 5 times here is a 1 green, 4 blue. Now I'm going to explain these a little bit later, why are they different prices and what their power levels are, but you are going to have to gather some of these resources. You can see for the shield types here, same thing, there's 3 different costs, and for the engine types, there's 2 different costs. The 1 engine type that you can get, that you start with, which is you can tell the difference, by the way, by these little arrows beside the engines. So this one has a double arrow, this one has a triple arrow, this one has a single arrow. For these technologies, the cost is written above each little spot here, and these spaces are actually for cubes. So you do have a stash of cubes in one of your bags here. So here are the blue cubes, for instance. You can place them all here. Those are called population cubes, but they also represent the amount of technologies that you're gonna purchase. So if you purchase a technology, you just place the cube in the cube space, and then you have that technology. Now, there are discounts for the technologies based on a couple of things, and these are going to be discovered, if you will, through research, which is one of the actions that you're going to be doing on your turn. So each technology receives a discount of 1 CP for every other technology of the same color a player has already researched. So you'll notice that there's 4 different colors based on these symbols here at the top of the columns. So if you bought this technology for 1 crystallized platinum, 1 CP, then the next one, even though it says 2, would actually only cost 1 because you get a discount of 1. The other thing is you'll notice that there's these symbols as to the different types of technologies. You also get a discount if you purchased one of those previously. So for instance, because this is a star technology right here, if I then wanted to buy this technology, it would cost 1 less, which would be actually free because I already purchased a star technology. This one up here, which is 7 crystallized platinum or CPs, would be 6 CPs instead because I already have a technology with a star. In fact, it would only be 5 because I not only have 1 star, but I also have 1 gray. So this counts as a gray and a star. There are other things that can give you discounts as well, such as cards that you might pick up. So you can really see how buying a couple of things of different types will make discounts later on. And if you're ever wondering what those things are, I do have, it's kind of hard to see here, but I do have a page that highlights all of the different technologies and what they do. This is also part of the rule book, which you might have to look at a little bit closer to zoom in on it. But it does explain what all of them do in the rule book itself. So I'm not going to go over each one of those until they come up during the playthrough of the game. Since the first phase of the game involves clearing off the market, I'm just going to talk about the market briefly. This is actually a quite, it looks like a complicated thing, but it really isn't. First of all, you only have to look at the number of players to understand what section of the market you're going to be working with. So since we're going to be playing a 4-player game, we're only looking at this section of the market. And there's 2 columns, or 2 rows, sorry. And a couple of things you need to know. The white writing is the ratio of exchange. So if you come to the market, you can buy or sell. Now, you can't do both until you have researched advanced trading. But if you wanted to buy or sell crystallized platinum, you could do so at a 3-to-1 ratio. So you could buy either the red or the green at a 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 crystallized platinum would give you 1 of the 2 resources. Here, the reason there's 4 spaces is because the first player to do this is going to get the best price. The second player would put a cube from their supply here. The third player would put their cube from the supply here, and the fourth player here. So you can see that the ratios get worse and worse if you're later on in the turn order. Here's where you would sell. So you would put your cube here if you're the first player, and you could sell 1 red or 1 green for 5, and then 4, and then 4, and then 3. Now, the reason the red writing is there is because, and you'll notice that it's a better ratio. This is 3-to-1, this is 2-to-1. That is also something you get when you research advanced trading. So getting that technology on the market could help you get better deals. So let's start looking at the phases of a turn. Now, this game uses the word turn, which I would actually use the word round to represent all players playing. Basically because the players kind of play at the same time for a lot of the game, but try to make sure you understand that 1 turn means everybody going through all of the phases. So the first phase, and I know it's a little bit small to see, is written down on the page here. So that would be your upkeep. And it says return cubes from the market. Now, there won't be any cubes in the market the first turn. Then it says increase population on home planet by 2. And if you have expert cloning researched, you'd actually get an extra population. Update the income and pay tax in turn order. So take 1 5 CP cylinder from each blue planet with a population. If you have the advanced CP mining, you get +1 cylinder. Take 1 axinium and 1 phasium token from each corresponding planet with population. Advanced mining of each type gives you +1. Pay 1 CP for each token of each type, or they can't be collected. So there's a tax every time you're getting red or green resources. And then repair ships if you have the technology. So that's the first phase. So let's just talk about that a little bit more in detail so you can see it on the board here. So you'll notice that your home planet has 5 blue cylinders listed and 2 cube listed as production. All right, that's what happens during upkeep. Now, the 2 cubes happen during upkeep. The 5 cylinders happened at the beginning of the game. So just like all the other planets received cylinders based on their color and the number that's on the planet itself, these happen at the beginning of the game. I've just populated it here. So you would get your 2 cubes, and then you get to take well, let's look at it again. You get to take one cylinder. Now those cylinders are worth 5 CPs, okay? So you get to take one cylinder. I'll grab it here. I'll move it to my player mat. So now you have 10 CPs to spend, because this one is a 5 and those are 5 that you started the game with. Your cubes come from your bag. There is a limited supply, and you do need some of your cubes for different things in the game. So I'm just going to populate this planet, and I'll come and do the other ones in a second. One of the cubes, for instance, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, needs to go on the victory point tracker spot. Okay, so everybody should have one cube here. And you are going to be using cubes from your bag to represent your research, as I mentioned earlier. So you do have a limited supply. Now, these are considered population when they're on a planet. They're not considered population when they're here. Okay, they say spare population cubes, but they can represent the cubes that are going to be put out on your research as well. But there is a limited supply, so just be careful with that. The next phase of a turn is the council phase. So it'll say remove any previous resolution cards from the game. There are no resolution cards yet. You're about to see what those are. Reveal political cards based on player count. So it's 3 or 2. Because we're playing a 4-player game, we will be revealing 3. So what are the political cards? So those are over here by the turn order track. I've already turned over 2 of them. I would just turn over another one here. And these are things that we're going to be voting on. And there's different types. There's resolutions. Let me see if I can find some others. There's laws that can come into place. Yeah, so, I mean, every one of them is a little bit different. Okay, resolutions and laws seem to be the majority here. I'm not going to go through all of them. And you're going to be voting on these. So they do different things based on, you know, what's said on the card. So in this case, it says large fleet. The building cost of all ships are reduced by 1 CP. So if somebody wanted to buy ships, they might want to, you know, have that card in play. And you'll notice it says remove from the game before the next council stage. So these resolutions are only out for a certain time. All right, that turn of all those phases. Laws, however, are in play until another law replaces them. Free market, all the players may use trade actions and reactions as if they had researched advanced trading. So this basically gives everybody advanced trading for this turn. And resistance, ships are not allowed to move through or stop in the hexes containing Centauran resistance. Now, I know you don't know what all of these things mean within the context of the game yet, but you do have to vote on them right away. We're going to have this phase happen right now. So in order to vote, you're usually going to be using CP, and you're going to be using your voting tokens. So let's just go back here and read what it says. Reveal political cards based on player count. We just did that. After discussion, bid with the ABC tokens and CPs. It's a closed all-pay auction. Ties are broken by the Chancellor, so it's one of the reasons why people might want to be Chancellor. And then we remove the losing cards from the game. So only that one card that wins the vote will be in play. Now, there is also a phase where we do a bonus action, and the Vice Chancellor will choose 2 bonus cards, give them to the Chancellor, who will choose one of them or none of them to play. And that bonus action will be done at the end of the action stage. And if it's a move bonus action, it'll be done during the conquest stage. And then we have elections. So the Chancellor breaks ties, but cannot choose in favor of themselves. After bidding, appoint the new Chancellor and Vice Chancellor based on order. So there's a couple of reasons to want to be Chancellor and Vice Chancellor. Definitely by the end of the game, because there's bonus points given to the Chancellor. As you can see here, the Chancellor gets 3 points and the Vice Chancellor gets 1 point at the end of game. But during the game, those are the 2 people who are going to be choosing those bonus actions. So there is some sort of benefit to being the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor. Also, player order is going to come into play in other places too. So, you know, it's always good to be first player if you can. So let's talk about the voting procedure here. So everybody should have in one of their bags, oh, here it is right here, 3 voting tokens, which are upside down. And in the game, physically, what you would do is you would hold these in your hand, and you'd also choose a certain number of CP, and you can make change if you need to. So remember, this cylinder here is worth 5 CP. So if you needed to make change in order to vote a certain number of CPs, or you could just use the ones. Now, you know what? I'm going to lock this down so it doesn't move. Oh, it looks like those got underneath the... There we go. Yeah, so you could make change or use the CPs here. And what I would recommend, if you're using the Tabletop Simulator version, is I made this little space here that's to hide your voting. So you could put, all 3 of your tokens here. You could put all of your CPs in there and then separate them however you want to vote. And when everybody's ready, you just select them and move them out onto the table. You can make some sort of agreement how you're going to do that so that it's not, so nobody's cheating. All right. And then whichever resolution or law comes into play based on the votes will be the one that's enacted during that turn. The other 2 are discarded. So let's say for the sake of this, starting, and at the beginning of a game, folks, as like any game, the play is a little bit slow, and you may not be able to even do what comes out at first, but it's to get you used to the phases, right? So let's say we just discard these 2 cards. Oops. And that will be the one that's voted on for this first phase, or this console phase. And then we would do the bonus action thing. So the Vice Chancellor chooses 2 bonus action cards and gives them to the Chancellor. So right now, I am playing the Chancellor's position, and this is the Vice Chancellor. So the bonus cards are over here. There are as many bonus cards as there are cards that you're going to play as a player, which we're going to see in a second, but this will kind of start you thinking about what are the different things that can happen during the game. A lot of them are pretty self-explanatory, so buy upgrades. Well, those are the upgrades that I showed you on your player mat. Mining. Mining allows you to produce red or green resources better and to get them. And if you have the advanced mining, then you get more. Okay. Move allows you to move your ships, and there's going to be combat involved with that potentially. You can't buy the upgrades until you've researched them. All right. So you have to research them to put your cubes out, and then you have to buy them if you want them on your ships or wherever you want them. Supplies is a special action that's not actually part of the regular actions in your hand. It allows you to receive 1 upgrade for free if you have researched the required technology. So this is one thing that some players struggle with. Even I may have messed it up when I was explaining this. You can't buy an upgrade until you've researched the upgrade. Once you've researched the upgrade, this card would allow you to get 1 of those upgrades for free. Trading is pretty self-explanatory. It's dealt with the market that I explained on the turn order track. It'll just allows you to do a trade, and then building ships is pretty self-explanatory as well. It's going to allow you to build ships. So these are bonus actions that happen during the action phase, which we haven't talked about. But like I said, what happens is the Vice Chancellor picks 2 of them, and the Chancellor decides which one to keep. The Chancellor could actually choose to not pick any of them. Let's say the Chancellor wasn't going to get a benefit from one of these cards themselves and wanted to withhold it from the other players. They could choose none of them if they so wish. So we're going to pretend that for this one, the Chancellor is going to pick mining as the bonus action. And that was all part of the council phase. We have the elections that are the last part of the council phase. And this is where you actually elect a new Chancellor and Vice Chancellor. So how that works is you're going to be bidding with money. You're going to be bidding with your CPs. And the election is pretty self-explanatory. Whoever bids the most CPs is going to become Chancellor. Whoever bids the second most is going to become Vice Chancellor, and then it's player order that's going to be assigned based on how many CPs have been bidded. If there's a tie, it's the Chancellor that breaks the tie. The Chancellor cannot vote for themselves if they're tied for highest. So the Chancellor breaks ties, but has to vote not for themselves in a case like that. And that rounds off the council stage. It's a pretty complicated stage for the very beginning of the game, especially if you don't know what some of those political cards do and what the bonus actions are. So this is part of the complexity of the game. The action stage is an interesting part of the game. That's where you're going to be choosing your actions. So I want to show you what the action cards look like for a player. And here they are right here. You also have them in your hand if you know how Tabletop Simulator works, but you know, if you're playing the physical game, you'd have them in your hand. So there's 2 actions on every card. The top action is the main action. The second one is the reaction action, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But you'll notice it's buying upgrades. So if you've researched previously, you can then buy the upgrade. Banking is getting money. Building ships is building ships. Researching is putting a cube down on your research track and researching a new technology. Mining is getting resources. Trading is buying or selling resources, depending on what you need. All right. So it's all explained here. First action and reaction are optional and cost 2 population cubes from the home planet. So everybody's going to do your first action, and then they can do the reaction if they want to. Now, you'll notice it says cost 2 population cubes from the home planet to do the reaction on another player's card. It only costs 1 on your own. So what that means is, if let's say the red player here decides to play banking, okay? Well, they could plan to use their research, but they need to take a population cube off of their planet and put it on that card, and therefore losing that population in order to do that. Every other player is going to pick one of these cards as well. If they want to, if any other player wanted to activate my research, they'd have to put 2 population cubes from their home planet on the reaction action in order to use it. So you're going to be potentially able to do 2 different actions on every player's card play, but you have to have the population cubes in order to activate the reaction portion of it. And that's like where a lot of the stuff in the game is going to happen. Once you use those population cubes, by the way, they are returned to the bank, your bank of population cubes, so they don't go back on your home planet. If you have the basic politics technology, it allows you to then pick up that card and bring it back into your hand, because then you're actually going to do another action turn. A second action and reaction is going to happen. And this is where the game speeds up compared to Twilight Imperium, I believe, because you actually have multiple actions during one full turn of all of the phases. And then you have the bonus action on top of that. Now, before I get to the bonus action, you'll see here it says Master Politics Technology. Players do a third action, but they cannot do a reaction on that third action. So if you have researched that technology, you can actually play another card on your turn and do another action. You just can't do any reactions at that point. Then the bonus action from the council stage is done. So that's the bonus action that everybody voted on, or sorry, that the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor voted on here, which is mining this turn. So you see that mining's coming up, so you could either mine twice during your turn, or you could choose to not mine with your cards and wait till the mining comes up on the bonus action. Now, if it's a move, the issue with moving during the game is that can potentially cause combat. So all movement is done usually for the bonus action at the end, so that you have potentially another conquest stage. So here's a description of all of the different all of the different action cards. So research is learn one technology by paying its cost in CP with its discount considered, and place a population cube from the bank onto your card. banking, collect 4 CP, or roll a die, 8 CP with advanced banking tech. Now, what does that mean, roll a die? I had mentioned near the beginning of the tutorial video here that there's a house rule that I like to use, and here it is. In the new edition of the game, instead of rolling dice for resources, you just take 4 of them. So the issue was that the original game, you rolled dice for your resources every time. Well, rolling dice can hurt people randomly, and that could seriously offset the game. So the creators of the game, when they did the second edition, they said, okay, you're just going to take 4. Now, what I did as a house rule is I said, you can choose to either roll or just take 4, because if you choose to roll, you potentially could get more than 4. So I like that, because some players want to take the risk and see if they can get more. And where it says you can take 8 instead of 4, you just roll 2 dice instead of 1 die. Okay, so that's for the banking. Building ships, pay, see blueprint, and place on your home planet. So every ship is going to have a cost to build. This one's 2 CP, this one's 1 red and 3 CP, this is 2 red and 5 CP, and this is 1 red and 4 CP. So every ship has a cost, so you have to have those resources in order to build the ship. Ships are always built on your home planet. Buy upgrades. A lot of people make this mistake. You have to research before you can buy, all right? So if you have researched something, you can then pay the cost. Now, phase cannons are the easiest cannons to get. You don't have to research to get more cannons on your ship. So you would just pay the cost of whatever technology you want to buy. And once you place something on your blueprint, so you'll notice that the tokens here are placed right on the ships. That means every ship of that type now has that upgrade. Okay, you don't have to upgrade every ship individually. It's every ship of that type. Upgrades are placed immediately and may be rearranged between ships except during the conquest stage. Note, and this is something you have to remember, you can only ever have 1 drive per ship, so you can't put 2 of the 1 level drives, even though it looks like there's space for 2 of them. For some of the ships, you actually have to replace it with a level 2 or level 3 level drive. And you can see those drives are here and here in the technology charts. Mining. Place a total of 4 resources. Again, this is that home house rule that I did. You can roll a die if you'd prefer to take the risk of getting less than 4. Place a total of 4 resources on any planets where you have population. So there's a max and a type on every hex, and if you have advanced mining, you'd actually put 8 out there. So let's just go look at the hexes here quickly. So let's look at this one here. So this one, you can only put 3 at a time, is what that means. Okay. Some of them you can put more out. So this one is 5. When you put resources out, when you either choose the 4 or roll a dice, you can split them up however you want. So if you own 2 blue planets, you could put like 2 resources here and 3 resources there if you rolled a 5. If you had 8 to do, you could fill both those planets up, but you can't put more than 3, you can't put more than 5 on each of these planets. All right, so those are the maximums for the planets. So you should be starting to get an idea now as to how all those actions work. Trade is use the market track. That's the last one you could choose. You place a population cube from the bank on the leftmost space, perform up to 4 exchanges, or roll a die. So again, you don't have a unlimited amount of trades you can do. You can only do 4, or you can roll a die to try to get more. All exchanges are of one type, either buy or sell, but not both, until you have advanced trading. Once you have advanced trading, then you can do buying and selling. So once all the action card things have been done, you can fire your weapons of mass destruction. Now, we haven't talked about those yet, but you can buy weapons of mass destruction. They look like these symbols up here. There's different types. Some of them attack resources, some of them attack population, and some of them destroy planets completely. So they can be pretty intense, and they're fired once per turn. You assign targets in turn order. You have to do a distance check. So here you actually do have to roll a die. The number must be greater than the distance from hex to hex. If you have radar tech, you get to add 1+1 to the die. So that's a researched technology. When you roll, 5 and 6 are hits. 5 for hypersonic rockets, 3 for biochemical rockets, and 2 for graviton rockets. So it's harder and harder to hit with the more deadly weapons of mass destruction. And you destroy the corresponding targets on planets or the planet itself. Ships are not affected by these, so you're only affecting stuff that are on the planets. And then we get to the conquest stage. So let's stop reading the instructions here. I hope they've been kind of giving you an idea as to what can be done during the game. Let's take a look at a typical maybe first go at the phases in a turn. And what I've done here is I've selected some cards for each player. Now, let's start with the Chancellor here, playing the research card. The rulebook actually recommends that you do not play the mining card on your first turn, simply because mining will produce on your planets, but the only planet you have at the moment is your home planet, and you've only lost 1 CP cylinder off your home planet. So being able to mine 4, bring 4 in, you can only bring 1 in anyway because there's a maximum of 5, isn't going to be very helpful in the first turn. So that is one thing that you have to keep in mind, that certain actions may not be as useful as others. The Chancellor here has decided to research, and that just means that they can pay a certain amount of CP to be able to put a cube out from their bank of cubes onto their research board here. So let's say that we're going to research. Now, a good one to research at the very beginning here is basic research, because what it does is it gives you 3 of the symbols, the only 3 symbols, in fact, of the different resources, the different technologies that are in the columns. That means you're going to get a discount each time. So we're going to pay 1 CP. We're going to put a cube out on our basic research. These action cards would all have been placed face down and then revealed all at the same time. And then in player order, you do all of the top actions on the cards. So we just did the research action. I'll put the CP here. Okay, so the next action is banking. So if we look at the banking action, that's where you get money from the bank based on a die roll, or you can just take 4 CP from the bank. So just for fun, let's see what would happen if we decided to roll a die here. See if we can get more than 4. Hey, I get 5 CP. So that is, again, a homebrew. It is a house rule. It's not an actual rule. You can just take 4 if you want to, but I decided to roll the dice. So I get 5 CP. Put into my supply. The next player decided to do trade. Now, why would you want to do trade at the beginning of the game? If we look at the market, again, just to remind you, you can trade money for the resources, right? Well, what if this player wants to build ships? And that is actually the second reaction action on their card. To build ships, you need resources because each ship has a certain cost. So CP and it's all the red resource. Okay, it's either CP or the red resource. So we want some of those red resources. We need to buy them right now because we don't have any. We don't have any planets that produce the red resource. So, in order to do the trading, you take a cube from your supply. You put it in the correct column. So what we want to do is we want to buy. So we're going to put it in this column here, and it's the 3-to-1 column on the 4-player. All right. So we are the first player to do this, so we're going to go in that column, and it's a 3-to-1. So I can exchange 3 CP for 1 red, which is what I'm going to do because I'm planning on buying a ship, perhaps. There we go. And I get 1 red. So all of my resources on this Tabletop Simulator version of the game are in these bags over here. You've got CP, you've got the red resource, the green resource, and you've got damage counters as well. So I'll just take 1 red resource here and put it over onto my player map. Boom. So that's done. And then it would be the 4th player's turn, and they decided to also trade. So I just wanted to show you what happens when 2 players decide to do the same trading action. They'll just put their cube on the... They didn't know that that player was going to pick that one, by the way. So they put their cube here, and they unfortunately don't have as good a deal. So they get a 4-to-1 ratio. Now, what would the green resources be used for? So the green resources are used to buy your upgrades. So once you've researched your upgrades, you maybe want to buy them. So let's say they wanted to buy some better cannons than the ones they start with, right? Or some better shielding than the ones they start with. They would need a green resource for any one of these, right? So let's say that's what they're planning to do. They want to eventually be able to buy some of those. So they have to exchange a 4-to-1 ratio. So I'll just take one of these off. And that's 4. We'll move those over to the bank. And they're going to take a green resource from the bag. Boom. Put it on their green resource. Okay. And then you can all do a reaction if you want to. You can either spend 1 population to activate the reaction on your card, or you can spend 2 population to activate the reaction on somebody else's card. So if we look at the first player, again, this goes in player order, they have trade on their as their reaction. So they may decide to do that. They might decide to trade, but they only have, I mean, they have 9 CP. So actually trading probably wouldn't be a bad idea, except that now they'd only be trading at a 5-to-1 ratio. So they may choose to wait. I think that's what they're going to do. They're not going to activate that particular one. So maybe they'd activate the research on that one. Okay. So they'd have to pay 2 population off of their home planet, and they just go right back to your bank. So we'll just move those to their supply. And they say, okay, I'm activating the research on that person. So they actually get 2 research, all right? And you also have to remember what the bonus one was. Now the bonus one is mining, which is going to be relatively useless, except to restock the 1 CP that you lost on your planet. But that's the one that was chosen, so we also get to do that one at the end. Yeah, so we can research 1 thing, and now that we chose this one as our first one, all of the other researches are 1 less because of that, and if we chose one in this column, it would actually be 2 less. Now you don't have to go up in order. You can skip and go to another one if you have the ability to pay it. Now we only have, so we've got 4 plus 5, we've got 9 CPs that we could spend. We don't necessarily want to spend them all in one shot. I don't remember what this advanced maneuvers one does. I'm just going to go look and see. What does advanced maneuvers do? Advanced maneuvers, deploying population no longer needs a dice roll, always successful. Yes, so when you've got population on a ship and you want to send it down to a planet, you actually have to do a dice roll to see if you're successful. I don't think you actually lose the population, but it just stays on the ship and it isn't a successful transfer. So I don't think I need that one yet, but I wouldn't mind researching a better weapon for some of my guns or better a better weapon for some of my ships or shielding for my ships. I don't think I need movement yet. How much? So electromagnetic shields is 1. This one's 7. It would be 6 because of this. That's pretty expensive. In preparation for wanting to buy ships, why don't we research advanced trading right now? It would actually only cost me 3 because I've already bought one with that symbol. It matches that symbol there. It's not in the same column, but it does match the symbol. So it's only going to cost me 3 CP. So we're going to do that. So we're going to take one of our cubes. We're going to place it down onto advanced trading, following the shadow. It's the easiest way to see where it's going to go. And that costs me, I've already forgotten what I said, 3 CP. So 1, 2, 3. And now I have that as research. They had banking as their first one, so now they could research as well. So let's say they go a little bit crazy here and spend 11 to get solid state lasers. It might not be the best thing to do, because it's so expensive and they're not getting a deal for it, but hey, it's not my play, not my character. So it's going to be this, and one of these to buy that. 6 plus 5 is 11. Okay, so they did their research, and I almost forgot that cost the population cube. So that population cube comes back. I probably could have just taken it from the planet and put it directly on the research track. Let's see what this player might choose to do. So this player traded as their first. Now, they could actually build a ship right now. They have a green resource. That's what they traded for. Sorry, a red resource, my mistake. They have a red resource, and let's say they wanted to build another carrier. So carriers are useful because they can bring population between planets. You'll notice it's a little bit hard to see, but the carrier has 3 squares here. So every carrier can carry 3 population. Every cruiser can only carry 1 population, and neither of these 2 ships can carry any. So let's build another carrier. It's going to cost 4 CP and 1 red or Axinium. Oh, wait a second. They can't do that. They only have 2 CP. Oh no, never mind. I missed this cylinder here. So they definitely can. So it was what, 4 CP? So I'm going to exchange this cylinder for 1 CP from the bank. They are going to spend their hard-earned Axinium as well. To buy themselves another ship. And that's going to be a carrier. And that goes on the home planet. Boom. And that cost a population token. So I don't think I took it off their home planet yet. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's right. So I got to take the population token because I activated a reaction. I have to take a population token off the planet to do that. And this person's not going to do anything. Let's just say that that person's going to hold on to that. So that was the first action that was chosen by everybody. And now we do it again. So now there's a second action phase. Now, if a person had the right technology, I can't remember what it's called, but there is a technology that allows you to bring that card back into your hand. Nobody has that technology right now, so you can't do that card again. So if we look at the cards that I do have in my hand, I can do any of these. I would probably try to bank. Again, beginning of the game. And this would be placed face down. So I'm going to select the second card for everybody, and then I'll come back to the gameplay. So let's see what everybody chose to do. So now this card is no longer good, so we'll just move that back. So that person chose to bank. This person chose to buy upgrades. this one back. This person chose to bank. Move this back. And this person chose to research. So you now see what all of the different players are choosing to do, and also what you potentially could activate if you don't want to activate your own reaction. And you don't have to do a reaction. And at the beginning of the game, you may not want to, because it gets pretty expensive. So banking, this person's not going to take the risk. They're just going to take the 4 CP. Boom. This person is going to buy upgrades. So which upgrades would they want? Well, remember, this person didn't buy any of these. So they have 4 CP. Let's say they do the same thing. And this might happen at the beginning of the game too. A lot of people may choose to buy that one first because it does give a discount overall. It's not a bad buy for the beginning of the game. And then this person over here decided to bank. So they're also just going to take the 4. They're not going to risk rolling the dice. And then this person here is researching. Now they actually did buy a phasium, the green resource. So that would allow them to potentially get one of these upgrades once they've researched it. So let's say they want to concentrate on upping their... they only have 5 CP to spend. So this one's 2 CP for a level 3 cannon. So that's probably what they're going to do. So let's get our change here. And they're going to put a cube from here onto plasma cannons. Boom. So now they have the ability to build that to put on their ship. Okay. Now to build that plasma cannon, it does take 4... Wait a second, I'm looking at the wrong one. It takes 3 CPs to do it. Okay, so they have 4, so they'd be able to buy 1 if they wanted to. And this is where you would decide whether or not you'd now take a reaction. And I'm going to say, for the sake of argument, that because we've already done a lot of spending, and you can see how long the action phase can last, because people have a lot of decisions to make as to which way they want to decide to go. Most likely people are going to want to explore very quickly, and that's going to be happening in the conquest phase, which is coming up. But let's say that nobody decides at this point to do a reaction just because it is too expensive to do it. Once the action phase is done, then the conquest stage begins. The conquest stage is where all ships are going to move and potentially spread population. Now, at the beginning of the game here, there's only really chances of encountering Centauran resistance when you move, and if you do encounter them, you will have to fight them. Now, Centaurian resistance can be quite dangerous, depending on their level, and it's based on these cards here. So let me just show you. So a Centauran resistance 1 is going to have a 1 times fight ability, maybe a 2 times fight ability. What that means is how many dice they're going to roll, and successes are 5s and 6s. So on 1 die, it's 2 out of 6, or 1/3 of a chance of success, right? Now resistance 2, already you can see we've got a 3 times here, a 2 times. Okay, so now all of a sudden you're rolling 2 or 3 dice each time you're attacking one of those, or they are. And a level 3 can be rolling 5, 4, 5. Okay, so it's quite dangerous to be fighting the level 3s right at the beginning of the game, because those numbers represent how many dice you're rolling. And that's exactly how it works for your ships as well. Oops, I forgot to put that card in there. Your ships have a strength based on their guns. So right now, the only ships that have guns are the carrier and the Dark Raider. And that was suggested at the beginning of the game. You didn't have to put them on those ships, but they did recommend it. Mainly because the Dark Raider is kind of your quick fighter and less expensive if you lose it. It's also worth less victory points. Whereas your carrier can carry population, which is what you're probably going to want to do, and you also want to be able to protect them. But you're only rolling one die. So when you go to fight those Centaurans, you might be in trouble if you're rolling only one die. Even level 1 Centauran can potentially roll 2 dice. Now you also have a shield on your carrier. If a ship receives damage higher than their shield value, they are destroyed. So the shields are really the only defense a ship has against getting hit. So it's pretty dangerous to get into battles right away, which is why you're going to want to upgrade your shields and your guns as fast as possible. If you get all the way up to here, your antimatter cannons, you'd be rolling 5 dice for every cannon of that type you have. Some ships can have more than one. Your cruiser can have multiple, and engines are the only things you can only have one of. If you can fit 2 tiles in this space, you can have 2 1 guns, or you could have 1 big gun. So you can mix and match however you want and fit them into the spaces. This one potentially could have 3 1s, or 1 big one and 1 small one. So that's where the blueprints come into play, is to track all that. The way Conquest works, by the way, and I'm just going to go over to the other side of the table here for a second, because I took out some tiles to show you what it looks like. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to use these tiles that show which direction the ships are going to be moving in. Everybody places them face down on the board, and then you all reveal them at the same time so that there's no cheating as to where you're going. I don't use these at all. There are some variations in the game that allow you not to use them. Basically what they suggest is every player would move their ships in reverse player order, so that the person who's first player has a bit of an advantage to know where they can move their ships, but they're free to move them in any direction. It does make for a faster game, and it is a faster game variant. At the beginning of the game, like right now, there's not much point because you can't really interfere with each other. We can only all move one space anyway. So there's no way that we could, well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. We could potentially encounter each other here or here, but once we encounter each other, we then have to fight the Centauran resistance that are in those spaces too. That's a little bit scary right now. So the chances of that happening are very, very slim, unless you're really risky, you think it's worth risking all of your ships. So I would say at the beginning of the game that those tokens, those movement tokens, are not necessary. By the way, just to be sure it's clear, those numbers match the numbers that are on the tiles, and all of these tiles should be placed so that the numbers are facing in the same direction. So all the 2s are on this side, all the 3s are on the top, all the 4s are on this side. So if I put a token right here, or actually you wouldn't put it on the direction, but if you put a token on the tile that has a 4 on it, you know that your ships are moving in that direction. If you put a token on a tile that has a 1 on it, you know your ships are moving in this direction. So you can use those tokens if you want to be sure that nobody's cheating, but it does lengthen the game quite a bit. So let's start with the first player here. Because there's probably not going to be any combat right now during the conquest phase. By the way, I did skip the weapon of mass destruction phase. I don't remember if I mentioned that already, because nobody has weapons of mass destruction. So we're going right to the conquest phase. The first thing you can do is you can mount population onto your ship. So all of your carriers can have up to 3 population on them. And when you're going to a blue planet, you don't have to test to see if your population can go down on the planet. But if you're going to a red or a green planet, you do have to test if your population moves down to the planet by rolling dice. So I think because I'm already producing the blue resource on this planet, that I'm going to move my carrier to this planet, and I'm going to bring 3 population cubes with me to populate that planet. And at the beginning of your turn, you do get 2 population each time on this planet. Now that means I'm only going to be populating that planet. There's nothing else going anywhere. My raider can't carry population, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I think I will move my raider to this planet, potentially go fight that resistance just to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to adjust the board here with other players' movements. You don't have to see all of those movements, and we'll come back in a second and see what happens. So I'll show you what I did here. I decided to move, as I showed you, my carrier here with 3 population cubes. I brought 3 population cubes for the purple player to this planet. It is a blue planet, so I put them right down on the planet immediately. I'll show you how you check to see if you can bring population down. For this player, here's what I was thinking. Just to show you strategy, I'm going to bring 1 cube only to both of these. This one goes directly on the planet because it's a blue planet, and this one has to check. But there is an upgrade that allows you to bring population from your home planet or between any planets where you have cubes for free. I can't remember what the upgrade is called. It's right here, civilian ships. During conquest, you may freely move population cubes among planets you already have cubes on. So that particular technology, if you research it, you can move cubes around as long as you have cubes on those planets. So let's say that player was deciding to do that. Then there's this one, advanced maneuver, which deploying population no longer needs dice rolls. It's always successful. So that one's a good one to have, so you don't have to worry about potentially deploying population. Now, that was part 1 of the conquest phase. If there were any enemy ships, including Centauran ships, in your vicinity, you'd have to fight them. You'd fight enemy player ships first, and then you'd have to fight the Centauran ships that were left over afterwards. But none of us wanted to do that yet because we're not ready for that. So there's not going to be any combat. Just to remind you how combat works, you just add up how many dice you'd be rolling based on how many cannons you have and damage symbols that you have on those cannons. 5s and 6s are successes. Everybody rolls basically at the same time, and then you assign damage in forward player order. And any ships that have more damage than shields, all shots are fired at the same time in this game, so everybody could die. Okay, but you assign damage in forward player order, and then you see who's left. So at this point, we'd want to check to see if we can deploy population. So if you want to, and this is only when you're descending on a red or a green asteroid. So you need to roll a 4 or a 6 on a die for every cube that you want to send down. So because I'm trying to send down 3 cubes, I have to roll 3 dice, and only the dice that are 4 to 6 represent a success. So let's roll these 3 dice. So 2 of them succeeded, 1 did not. So I'm able to put 2 population down on that planet, and this cube is up in space with that ship. And every player would have to do the same if it's not a blue planet. So this player does not have to check. This player has to check for that one. So we'll roll a blue die over here. So they're able to get their population down on that planet. By the way, one of the reasons you want to do this is because the victory condition is gaining victory points for how many population cubes are on a specific planet. If you have the most population on that planet at the end of the game, you're going to get the point value that's on the planet. And you can see here the point value is a 1. Some point values are higher than 1. I may not be able to find one right now to show you. So that one's a point value of 2. This one's a point value of 2, and you can check those at any time during the game if you'd like to know. Okay, and then the middle one is a point value of 3 at the end of the game. So you want to spread your population not only to be able to have access to those particular resources, but also for points at the end of the game. And now green would have to roll 3 dice to check to see if they get their population down on the planet. So let's do that right now. So only 1. Bad news for green. So those population are still on that ship. So if that ship was ever destroyed for any reason with the population on board, the population does return to your pool. So now what you do is you actually repeat the conquest phase a second time. So you can spread out on the map one more time again. And if the bonus action that had been chosen at the beginning by the Chancellor and the, right here, if that had been a movement action, then, and you know what, we forgot to do the mining action a while ago. So that means we all would have gotten another blue resource on our planets for that mining step. So sorry about that, I completely forgot. There's a lot of stuff to remember, that's why I have that sheet of paper on the side. But anyway, as I was saying, if this had been a move right here, you would do a third conquest action. So there's supposed to be another conquest action and then a move action as well. But yeah, that finishes basically one full turn of the game. So what you would do is you would move the turn order track one space right here. And we're only playing 7 rounds, okay? And then do your upkeep phase. The only difference between this upkeep phase and the other one is you will return the cubes from the market, because we did go to the market, some of us. So those are these cubes here, so blue and green would get their cubes back. Those just go to the pool, like so, and like so. So that's the return to the market, return the cubes from the market portion. Then we would increase population on our home planets by 2. If you had expert cloning, you'd get an extra 1. You'd update your income and pay tax. So in turn order, you'd take 1 5 CP cylinder from each blue planet with a population cube. So let's just look at red here. Red only has their home planet that has a population cube on it that has blue resources. All right, so they would get 1 of those. Purple has their home planet and this planet, so they would get 2 cylinders. So all of a sudden they've got quite a few more credits coming in. Green only has, actually has, sorry, not green, blue player has 2 planets that give CPs, so they would also get 1 cylinder from each. Green has their home planet, and that's it. And you start to see the distribution of planets here and how some of them are surrounded by more blue than green than red. Green is actually the most rare of the planets, if I'm not mistaken. So depending on where you place your home planet at the beginning of the game, you might have access to a lot more resources than somebody else, which just means the other person would have to probably go to the trade market a lot more often to switch out resources. And then a new thing for this round, you would then do your take 1 green and 1 red token from each corresponding planet with population. If you had advanced mining of each type, you would get +1. You pay 1 CP for each token of each type that or they can't be collected. So if we look at red, besides the blue that they'd be getting from their home planet, which I could just move off like this, we have population on this red planet. So we would get 1 red, but we have to also pay the tax for that, which is 1 CP per cylinder. If you can't pay the tax, you can't take that resource. So I'll bring these over here. The blue would go here, the red would go here, and I would take 1 CP. They got connected. I would take 1 CP and pay it to the bank to be able to take that as a tax. For the purple player, the purple player would only have gotten those 2 blue. The blue player has 1 on this green, so it would get 1 green along with the 2 blue it got from here, and the green player would get 1 red if they could pay the tax, and the 1 blue from their home planet that they got earlier. So now all of a sudden you've got resources coming in. That might be the exploit part of the 4X designation of this game. And then you repair any ships. So if you have the technology to repair, which is basic repairs right here, you're able to take 1 damage token off of a ship at that point, off of every ship at that point in the upkeep phase. Then you start over with the council phase. You do all of the, so you remove any previous resolution cards. So those are these cards here, right? You remove that. You put out 3 more political cards, and you'd bid on them. And now you're starting to have a better idea as to how those political cards can affect the game, right? So double the result of all die rolls for banking actions and reactions. Now, because we're not using die rolls, you could just double that 4 to an 8 and the 8 to a 16 if you had the tech. And then it also says remove banking law from the table if there was one. Now, there isn't one. And remember, remove the game before the next count. Remove from the game before the next council stage. Just realized there's a spelling mistake there. Tax exemption. Players do not pay tax, which is a pretty good one for everybody. So, yeah, that would happen right at the beginning of the upkeep phase, or during the upkeep phase when you're getting all of your resources, your Exinium and Phasium. You wouldn't have to pay tax. So that's actually a pretty good one. I would see a lot of players wanting to vote for that one. And research reactions do not cost any population. Oh, that's not a bad one either, just for research though. So you have to make sure that you have a research coming up as a reaction. So this the bottom part of the card. So you start to see how those cards can affect the game, right? The bonus cards also would be redistributed again, and the counselor and the chancellor, and the vice chancellor would decide on which one would potentially be involved, if any. So the game just keeps going like that until the 7th round, and you track your victory points. We haven't looked at combat yet, which is one thing I do want to look at before I end the tutorial, but that's basically how the game works. So let's take a look at an example of combat. So here you'll notice that there's a hex that has ships from 2 different players, the red player and the purple player. Purple carrier actually is carrying 2 population cubes as well. And there's also a resistance token on the planet. So as soon as movement has taken place, if the movement ends with 2 players in the same hex, then there is going to be some combat. One note about ending up on the same hex: certain ships might end up with bigger engines which allow them to travel multiple hexes. If you are doing that, space is big, you can go through a hex containing an enemy's ships if your final destination is a hex beyond that one, without triggering combat. It's only if all the ships end up on the hex as their last movement that there will be combat. At this point, what you'd want to do is you'd want to check to see what are all of the defenses and offensive capabilities of everybody's ships. So if we look at the red player's ships, which ships are involved, we have a Dark Raider and we have a Cruiser. So if we look at the Dark Raider, which is this one, the Dark Raider has 1 attack, 3 shields. The Cruiser, which is this one, has 3 attack. So in total, the ships that are on that hex are going to roll 4 dice. 5 and 6 are hits. For the purple player has a carrier and a cruiser. So if we look at the carrier has 2 guns or cannons, and the cruiser has 3. So in total, they're going to be rolling 5 dice for damage. 5 and 6s are hits, and they also have a certain amount of shields. So both players would therefore roll their dice, and there are no hits at all for the red player, and there are 2 hits for the purple player. So the purple player would then assign damage. Damage is assigned with damage counters, which are found in this bag, which Tabletop Simulator you could move closer here to do so. They're just these black cylinders here. So there's 2 damage to assign, so I'll just put them out on the hexes here. And you could decide, as the purple player, where that damage goes. So, and all of that is happening simultaneously. So because there's a Dark Raider and a cruiser involved, the cruiser has no shields. The Dark Raider has 3 shields. So you could assign 1 damage to the cruiser and then 1 damage to the Dark Raider. The Dark Raider will survive the attack, but the cruiser will not. So you would remove the cruiser from the board, and then you would continue the combat. So now, because the Dark Raider is the only one involved, that leaves only 1 die to roll at this point for the red player. Purple player still has all of their dice, so the red player rolls, purple player rolls, red player is not having a good day. 2 hits from the purple player. Now that does not take out the Dark Raider, because the Dark Raider actually has 3 shields, but 1 more hit on that Dark Raider will be enough to take it out. So we'll just mark the 2 damages that ship has taken, and roll 1 more time. So still no hits for the red player, 1 more hit for the purple player. That means the Dark Raider will be removed, and the purple player will now receive victory points based on the 2 ships that were destroyed. So for the Dark Raider, it is 1/2 of a point, and for the cruiser, it is 1.5 points. So that is 2 points for the purple player. I have not put the purple player's victory cubes out here yet. So 2 points for that combat. And now the combat is not done, because the purple player is still in the hex with the resistance level 2 fighter. So what we then would do, what that player would do, is would draw a card for the resistance and look at what the power is. So that resistance fighter has 4 cannon power, 2 shields. If you successfully beat, you will get these potential rewards. So let's see what happens. Usually it's the player on the left that will roll the dice for the Centauran resistance. So I'll just use the red player's dice here. So this player, the purple player, still has 5 dice. So let's roll to see what happens. Ooh, that's a miss. And the Centaurans get 1 hit. So for the purple player, they had a cruiser and a carrier. The cruiser has 2 shields, the carrier has 1. So let's put the damage on the carrier. It's also carrying the 3 population, which, if that ship gets destroyed, the population cubes just go back to the stock for that player. One hit from the purple player to the resistance fighter. Let's put that on the card here. And you keep going like that. The Centauran resistance is gone. And now the purple player receives the rewards on this card, which say you can discard to learn immediately solid state laser cannon, so you could put a cube on there immediately, or you can keep this until the end of the game for 1.5 points. And that has to be decided immediately, so you have to decide which of the 2 you're taking right now. And that's basically how combat works. So that pretty much finishes the tutorial for the game at this point. I haven't shown how every little detail works. I haven't talked about all the technologies, but the rulebook explains everything very well, and you can just check the rulebook for that. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you'll get a chance to play this game and give it a try. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to talk about them, and you can probably find some solutions online anyway. So this is Check the Rulebook, signing off.